Welcome everyone to this third webinar. We're going to get started now. This is the third webinar on the IASC Guidelines on inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action, which is a series that we've been conducting specifically tailored to the GBV AoR community of practice. My name is Emma Pearce. I am actually a consultant working for the Women's Refugee Commission. Those of you who have joined us in previous webinars will have heard me speaking on the IASC Guidelines. WRC, for those who don't know, are a research and advocacy organisation focused on women, children and youth displaced by crisis and conflict. And this is a webinar series that we've been conducting in partnership with the GBV AoR community of practice, which has, I believe, over 800 colleagues that are part of this network from around the world. As you can see on the screen there, we have the GBV community of practice email. If you would like to join that network, there's a lot of great exchanges of experiences over email and sharing of tools and resources. So it's a really valuable resource. On that note, I would like to just send apologies from my colleague Sarah Martin, who is the moderator of the GBV AoR community of practice. Unfortunately, she's unable to join us today, but she will be following up with you all and available for any follow-up questions. So those of you who have joined us in previous webinars will be aware that this is a series that we've been conducting, and we are now on the third and final webinar within this series. The first webinar that we conducted gave more of an overview of the IASC Disability Guidelines, thinking through and sharing more information about its structure and also the key elements so that people could interact with it and engage with it more in their work. The second webinar, which was last week, we focused more on the recommended actions in the guidelines for GBV programs and GBV actors. And we heard from a lot of colleagues who are from both the GBV sector, but also from the disability movement sector, in particular, organisations of women with disabilities. We heard from several of them last week sharing their examples from the field. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on how we move things forward in our own context. And we have obviously people from all around the world joining this webinar today. So we will be creating some time in smaller groups where we can hopefully share our experiences with each other and identify what the next steps might be in terms of what types of support or tools or resources you need to implement these guidelines in your own programs and projects. Ooh, I'm sorry, jumped ahead a bit too far. Just as usual, a few housekeeping notes. We will ask everyone to keep their microphone on mute to help reduce the background noise. We're asking you to please introduce yourself in the chat box so that everyone can see who you are and where you're from. Sometimes it's not so clear from your name, so please do that. You can also pose any questions that come up throughout the webinar series, the webinar today in the chat box. We will be hearing from some colleagues in a moment from Cox's Bazar, and I have no doubt that you'll have some questions for them that you might want to pose in the chat box. I wanted to let those of you know that require closed captions, that closed captions are available on today's webinar. You'll see a CC button, a closed caption button in the Zoom toolbar. You click on that and it will show up as subtitles at the bottom of the screen. We also will be recording this webinar and posting it online through the GBV AoR Community of Practice YouTube channel. We also have been collating the PowerPoints from these webinars, the recordings, and then all of the different tools and resources that people are referring to in a Dropbox on the community of practice. And that's the Dropbox link there for those that are interested. We will be sending around this Dropbox link after the webinar series is complete, also in an email to you all. The last thing I just wanted to make note of is I know that many of you on the call require screen reader accessible formats. Those screen reader accessible formats for many of the documents, tools and resources that we share are also available on the GBV Community of Practice Dropbox. So please do go to that and look for those screen reader ones if you require those. On that note, I'm going to stop speaking and I'm going to hand over to some colleagues from Cox's Bazar. Today, we're going to be hearing from Shahida Priyanka, Asan Shaka, and Vivek Singh, who are going to share a little bit more about a consortium between CBM and World Vision International that explored disability inclusion in GBV programming in the Rohingya refugee response. On that note, I will hand over to, I think Shahida is going to start the discussion today. Thank you, Shahida.
Hi, good day to all. Welcome to my session, Disability Inclusion in GBV through Consortium Approach in the Rohingya Refugee Contest. And I am Shahida Amin Priyanka, working as a GBV coordinator in World Vision in Cox's Bazar Rohingya Refugee Response. And thank you all. And especially thanks to Emma and GBV COP members for giving me an opportunity to represent myself from Bangladesh Rohingya Refugee Contest. Emma, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. And along with me, my two colleagues from CDD CBM join with us, Mr. Asan Sarkar. He is working with me as he is working with CDD as a disability rights advocate, who is his partner of IPSA. And with me also Mr. Vivek Singh, who is working as a humanitarian disability inclusion advisor in CDD CBM. And we are moving to the next slide. First, we are introducing GBV programming in World Vision. In World Vision, we are implementing GBV comprehensive programming. First of all, prevention activities, and then response activities, and then skill development activities. In prevention activities, we are engaging through two ways. For women and adolescent girls engagement, we are using Safe Space, which we call WGSS, and for male engagement, we are using T-Corner, where we do preventional activity throughout the different awareness raising sessions. And in response activities, we are conducting this in the WGSS. This is case management. And then in the skill development activities, we are running also it in the WGSS throughout the different kind of vocational training, just like as handicraft and tailoring activities. In the tailoring, they are preparing different kind of traditional dress, which is adapted to their community. And in the other handicraft training, they are preparing fishing net and different kind of stitch with in bed sheet and pillow cover, and also they are preparing handmade fan and different kind of shoe pieces in the in centers. By this comprehensive programming, we are implementing in Rohingya Refugee Response Program. This is from my side from World Vision GBV comprehensive programming part. Now I am over to Vivekda for next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is Vivek. Just to give you an overview of how we are identifying barriers. So when we started this in last year, June, first of all, we had a assessment, which we call baseline assessment, to understand the access of services by different beneficiaries. So we consulted a number of people, and among them, we used a Washington group question to identify that among people whom we are consulting, how many of them are people with disabilities, and what are their preference, awareness level to the services which is available in the camp, especially related to GBV, and what is their current level of access. That gave us very good understanding on access issues. We also conducted the access audit of the existing facility to see that what are the physical barriers which hinders the participation or arrival into the facilities. We also had number of interactions with World Vision team through visits, through informal interactions, to understand their attitude and perception, because that was something first time World Vision staff were starting this sort of exhaustive inclusive program. So there was quite a lot of barriers within the staffing also. Can we move to next, Emma? And to address these barriers, what we did is we designed the new structure in such a way that all the features are inclusive. So we looked at all the measurement which we have found as a barrier in our earlier access audit exercise. And we recommended that these are the changes we have to make in the new structure. We tried to retrofit also in the existing structure, but since we had opportunity to make new structure, we thought to design it more inclusive. So you can see here, it was just after COVID restrictions. So some of the things have been broken down because of not being utilized for over 3-4 months of restriction. But this is one structure we have made fully accessible. Then we also reviewed the module of World Vision colleagues, the general induction module, the refresher module, to see that how we can integrate disability inclusion component into all the sessions, not necessarily a separate disability inclusion session. That was one thing. Can you go to next, Emma? There were also TOR for these protection committees. So we have women watch committees, some leadership committees. We wanted to see what are the barrier in TOR. So sometimes there was no mention of people with disabilities in the membership criteria. So we put a kind of compulsive inclusion of people with disabilities, women with disabilities into the TOR, so that field level staff can select the people according to that eligibility criteria. So that was also quite helpful in addressing the barrier at ground level. Next, please. We also provided disability targeted services. To address barriers, we also thought that all our awareness and promotion activities needs to be made accessible. So we developed a number of IASC materials where we portrayed positive image of people with disabilities participating in our skill development program, having more positive image in the posters we were using, flip charts we were using, and all those sort of tools we have used. In that phase, we could not use on the format of IASC, especially the visual and audio kind of thing, but we are planning to do it in the current phase. There was adaptation in the response also. We introduced mobile PSS services where our psychosocial counselor used to go at household level to provide case management services. But yeah, being very cautious of the principles which we have in place, the standard operating procedures we were following, making sure that it doesn't harm the survivor. We also conducted training for all the stakeholders who were involved in the referral so that they are sensitized on disability. We also made number of modification in our skill building program. So we added some reasonable accommodation. We sensitized the staff so that people with intellectual impairment, communication impairment, they could also participate. And also we graded our activities in such a way that all activities are not that complex to do for everyone. Can we go ahead? Mr. Ashan, would you like to go ahead on targeted services?
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Muhammad Hassan. I'm working as a disability rights advocate with CBM. Okay, thank you. I am really grateful to give me the opportunity. Now I am saying about our services. We provide disability targeted services, provision of assistive devices, and rehabilitation advice of beneficiaries with the help of CDD. I visited frequently to advise and motivated the people with disability to include the program. We also orient the staff on barriers. We also my visit motivated the people with disabilities and people with disabilities, and they felt they are included in this program. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Emma, can we go ahead? So yeah, some of the achievements I will quickly go through. We realized that now, one of the DFAT representative was there in the camp, and they were funding almost 6 different consortiums. And their feedback was that only World Vision-led consortium talked about some element of disability inclusion. No other people talked about it. So that's a big appreciation that we were able to provide terminologies at the ground level that staff and frontline stage, they were talking on disability inclusion, because that is not that easy usually. We also formed 55 women-led watch committee and leadership committees inclusive. So there are 1 to 2 people and women with disabilities included in these committees. We have now accessible safe spaces, including Tea Corner for Men. We have GBV facilitator with disability, and that helped a lot in changing the attitude of the community. So we incorporated some staff with disabilities at field level. That was great achievement for us to overcome the stigma which was there in the community. Accessible IC material training modules, those were made quite inclusive. We also made outreach vocational training for severe and moderate disability, and especially people who could not come to safe spaces. All of this has led to our AHP3, the third phase of project, which is being implemented in a mega consortium form, and World Vision is leading on disability inclusion. So that's a great example that how a mainstream organization can become a disability inclusion specialist with continuous support and handholding, for some period of time. Though in this phase, CBM and our local partner CDD will be supporting World Vision, but donor want to see World Vision as disability inclusion specialist technical lead. Next. Yeah, there were a number of challenges also, and I see some of the question in chat box which can be responded here. So initially we realized that staff were finding difficulty in finding people with disabilities, because there is a specific understanding about disability. So people who have visible disability, amputation, without limb, those were being only seen as people with disabilities. So we used a Washington group-based survey to identify more number of people, and that helped us a lot in giving us opportunity to make these 55 committees inclusive. So we have now a database which helps us in going to them for any consultation, any evaluation which is ongoing. We also found that a staff at different level within World Vision was having different understanding, because we were not able to reach to response manager or the sector lead because sometimes they feel that I can't spend whole day time for disability inclusion. So we made a very 2-hour, 3-hour sensitization module for them, so that they can feel and come, and get the sensitization over there. We had also challenges in the community because people without disabilities were hindering the access for people with disabilities, why you want to include people with disabilities when we are already doing everything. They will not be able to do, they will just be for namesake. And that took us some time to, with Mr. Hassan's visit, with having a better organization of people, motivating them, and also sensitizing the committees, it got overcome. We developed prototype of the safe space T corner. That was also difficult because number of players were involved there, right from construction, external construction player, to internal engineering department, communication department, program department. So coordinating with all of them was not that easy. We also realized that there is a very limited presence of OPDs in this region, and that has a bit challenge to get real, experience and expertise of these agencies. We have, realized that empowerment takes time, and it was a 1-year project with 4 months of restriction. So it was not that, great opportunity, but fortunately we have got now 3-year project. So it will give us more opportunity to learn and share the lessons. Next, please. Some of the impact we can see that people started participating in the committee's governance. So they were part of even the executive committee of the, these committees. They also have started taking interest in participating in the community governance system. As you know, it is a traditional governance system in the camp. So that was also quite encouraging for us as an impact in this 1 year. Next, please. Some of the testimonials, you can see that person with disability, he is a person with amputation, and he finds himself quite empowered, able to share his feeling, and which the opportunity which he was not getting earlier. Next, please. A girl with disability also shared that it was quite encouraging that psychosocial counselor and mobilizers used to visit her and provide her motivation, and used to interact with her, doing some home-based related activities, as we said, outreach activities. So those were some of the accommodation which we have taken, which was quite appreciated by the beneficiaries. Next, please. Yeah, that's it. If you have any comment or question, we will be happy to answer. I think I have answered one question. Emma, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Vivek, Asan, and Shahida. We do have some questions for you, and one of those questions was actually from Elena, and I believe that you have already answered this, which was, how are people with disabilities identified? Are you using the Washington Group questions or maybe other mechanisms? Elena did ask though specifically about people with cognitive and mental disabilities and how you're identifying them. Did you want to elaborate a bit further on that, Vivek, Shahida, or Asan?
So at the moment, Washington Group short set is one which we are using. Identifying psychosocial disability is a challenge in general. We are talking at MHPSS working group, and we have agreed to have more identification around that. But we have realized that that is one of the weaknesses at working group level also. But certainly through short set question, we were able to identify cognitive and intellectual impairment, and we were able to include them in our skill development and safe spaces at awareness level. At our awareness level, we had made extra effort to invite people with this sort of impairment, and we made reasonable accommodation to help them participate.
That's great, thank you. And then there was a question from Charlotte. Charlotte wants to know a little bit more about the home-based training and how you were able to implement this given all of the restrictions associated with COVID-19 at the moment.
Would you like to go ahead, Shahida Appa? I think during COVID-19, we were a bit less active because there was overall restriction on protection activities. But before COVID-19, if you can share, Shahida Appa, are you there?
Yes, Dada, thank you. In the COVID situation, we have restriction in the camp movement, but in the as usual situation before COVID, we used to home-based vocational training for person with disability. Just like as one person with women with disability, she is very interested to come our center. As you know, in Bazar, all Rohingya response in all household is in the hill area, so that is difficult to come with the center. So one of our trainer went to her house, and she is very interested to prepare handmade fan and different kind of bed sheet and pillow cover with different designable stitches. And by this, our trainer went to their house, and she trained her, and now she is capacitated, and now she can prepare handmade fan and also stitches in bed sheet and pillow cover. And also we have another beneficiary who is very much eager to come our center, and our center was constructed later due to the COVID situation and other issue, as we take temporary PU center. As this center was not accessible enough, this time we find barrier of person with who have visual impairment, and also she has slight problem in eye, and she wished to also engage in our skill development activity. We incorporate her. We went to their house, and we few days we trained her in the house, and then afterwards, when we move to our center, accessible center, we bring her to our center. Thank you, Vivekda.
Yeah, so usually trainer goes to household, but that was a bit restricted with COVID-19 restriction when only critical services were allowed to provide. So now we are resuming, and we are trying to reposition ourselves to make sure a schedule that how many people will be provided home-based training.
And for those of you that are interested, we have also put some resources relating to disability inclusion, disability considerations relating to COVID-19 and GBV. We have put some tools and resources on that topic in the Dropbox. So please go to that Dropbox and have a look at that after the webinar today. We have another question from Godfrey. Godfrey is commenting and asking a question. So one of the major challenges survivors with disabilities face is communication barriers, especially for those with hearing and vision impairments. He's interested to know what measures have been put in place to ensure that survivors of sexual violence with hearing impairments access comprehensive services during case management and legal support. what challenges have they faced previously, and how have, I think, what challenges have you faced as GBV actors previously, and how have you addressed them? So it'd be great to get your perspectives on case management for people with hearing impairments, and how to approach that.
I would just compliment and then would ask Shahida to respond on that. The sign language is something which is not there in Rakhine state itself. So it was an informal communication which deaf community is making, but we have not been able to document that because, as you know, this is a very beginning of the program. So it started late 2017 and until now we were in response phase. Now it has become protracted. So we are trying now to gear up to document some of the sign language which they are using. So at the moment it is pretty informal and we are taking help of caregivers and whoever they are comfortable with and they can understand each other. So that's how we are training referral pathway at the moment to use and work with people with communication impairment. Saidapa, would you like to add any challenges if you have noticed?
Yes, Dada. We find few challenges in terms of who have hearing and visual impairment, and who have visual hearing impairment. We incorporate them in our also case management and PSS support. Just like as we have paper and color pen paper, and they can draw in the paper, they can use sign language, or their caregiver can support us if the survivor feel free. We use survivor center approach that she wished to come with her caregiver or not. And then we use also IASC materials, which is more accessible. We show different kind of picture, and in this IASC we present different kind of picture with sexual assault and if teasing, this kind of things, where she can tell it easily that this happened to me, show this kind of things. And as our caseworker and counselor facilitator get training from how to deal with person with disability from CDT team, we apply this process in time of case management.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Vivek, Shahida and Ahsan, that I think might close our question time with you. I'm just wondering, did you have any final comments you wanted to share with the participants before we move on to the next section?
Yes, sure. We do find that this looks a very technical specialist area. So people remain a bit concerned that we are doing harm and it will be difficult to manage them. And question like this comes first, like how you will manage people with hearing impairment and vision impairment, which, somehow I realized, and I keep on, talking this to all the sector and subsector, that please, attempt it and make partnership coordination with the disability focused organization. So fortunately at GBV subsector level, we are revising the referral pathway and we are including the disability focal agencies in all camps so that when, capacity required, you can insource that from the disability organization or the DPOs which are available through this disability focused organization. So I would say, don't bother much about do harm in this case. They are your beneficiaries and you should attempt to address their needs. You should raise their, awareness level, include them into the programming, and where needed, you please coordinate and take support of disability focused organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivek, for that closing message. And I think I'd just like to add a little bit to that, if you don't mind, and
Yes,
share with the people on the call that, remember, persons with disabilities that are coming to you as survivors of violence, they need your skills and expertise in gender-based violence gender-based violence response processes. So remember, you have all the skills that they're looking for when they come to you. Sure, some people might need additional support relating to their disability, but their primary reason for presenting to you is because of an incident of violence or being at risk of violence. And you have a wealth of knowledge and expertise to bring to that person and to support that person in their recovery. Thank you to Shahida, Asan, and to Vivek for contributing to the webinar today. They won't be leaving us, and they will be joining in the activity that's coming up next. So thank you all. I'll just move on now to the next section. So for those of you that have joined us in previous webinars, you will recall that there are a range of recommended actions for GBV actors. And in fact, many of these we have had examples shared over the course of this webinar series. So please do go back to previous webinars. My apologies, I'm going to pause for a moment there because I can see that Chacha wanted to say something. I'm sorry, Chacha, I missed your message. What did you want to contribute something relating to the previous speaker? Please unmute yourself.
Emma, good afternoon, and good afternoon, colleagues. Sorry, I typed and assumed you'd see it earlier, but I just wanted to top up something, like a quick line on what Vivek, the remarks Vivek made. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Chacha.
Great, many thanks. Vivek and colleagues, thank you very much for the great presentation and example that you have just given. I want to echo the reality that we as GBV service providers, our very first priority is to ensure that we are available, accessible for the GBV survivor, regardless of who and how they look. And that includes their disability status. So the first point, which is also what Emma said, is to really look at yourself as the expert in the room for the service for which the person or the client ahead of you or in front of you has come. And therefore it is not about how the client or the survivor looks like. It's more about what is your expertise and how do you stay within the principles and the guidelines of doing no harm, respecting, keeping the confidentiality, and ensuring that the survivor in front of you receives the service in and within the required minimum standards, so that you really do not seem to be creating discrimination, is equally one of the principles. So that would be my first point. So let us just take the courage, let us include disability in our programming, ensure that we are able to also provide possibilities for access for services for the or GBV services for persons with all forms of disability, whether we are at the site or when we are on outreach services or when we are doing our awareness. We can be able to offer these services by ensuring that we refer appropriately, but also we provide the expertise as necessary. That is one. The second and final thing is to say that going forward, we are having very close conversations with Vivek and his team to basically increase the capacity in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of access and the close relationship between the colleagues who have the expertise in disability services, but also we, the colleagues who are in the GBV area, so that as the more we are close, the easier it is to even refer among ourselves, but also the easier it is to get help. For example, if a person with a form of disability that I cannot handle, say, for example, visual impairment or inability, then it's possible to quickly get help from a disability service not very far from where you are. So those synergies will actually become stronger as we move forward. So I want to encourage us to really look at it from the positive point of view, rather than from the challenge point of view where we feel like, oh, we cannot do it, maybe it is not for us, but let's look at it that we can do it for as long as we are competent and ready enough in our area. And then whatever comes ahead of us, we find solutions at and when it happens at the point of service. Thank you, Emma. I hope I didn't say too much. Over to you. Hello, Emma?
Hi, yes, my apologies, everyone. That was clearly a connection issue at my end. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Emma, you are back. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay. My apologies, everyone. Chacha, I believe that my apologies. I thought, have you finished your comment? Shall we continue, or I'm sorry.
Yeah, yes, I did. Yes, I did, Emma. Yes, I did, Emma. Thank you very much, and please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay,
Over to
thank you. Could I just check? Can people see my screen again?
Yes, Emma, it's clear.
It is, yes, we can see
Yeah.
it. We can see it.
Okay, wonderful. My apologies for that mishap at my end. Thank you, Chacha, though, for that comment, because I think it's a very good segue into this next section where we hope to talk a little bit more about the next steps and what you as GBV actors can be doing and implementing in your own programs. So we have, those of you that were involved in the previous webinars will know that there are a series of recommended actions that you can be implementing in your GBV programs. Many of these we have already talked about. They cover areas such as assessment, analysis, and planning, resource mobilization, and making sure that we actually integrate, addressing of barriers into our proposals. Under implementation, things such as recruiting persons with disabilities as staff, volunteers, and community mobilizers. We heard a great example of that just today from CBM and World Vision. And also engaging with local organizations of persons with disabilities, particularly those that are led by women, so that we can ensure that we are safely receiving disclosures and referring persons with disabilities to the right support. Coordination, there are a few just really practical actions we can do there relating to integrating disability into our standard sort of coordination meetings and talking about this topic in our coordination meetings. And then monitoring, thinking about how many people with disabilities are actually attending some of our GBV activities, particularly those women's empowerment activities that play such a critical role in prevention and recovery for survivors. I'm going to just ask you a question and launch a poll. It's an anonymous poll. It's just a chance, and I'm going to share it with you all. It's just a chance for us to reflect a little bit on what we think we could implement over the next 12 months. So what I've done now is you should see a poll that is showing up now on your screen. There are 8 recommended actions listed here in the poll. These are actions that we have already talked about. And I'd just like you to select the ones that you feel you might be able to implement in the next 12 months. So the first one is including persons with disabilities in age and gender appropriate GBV consultations. The second one is assessing the attitudes and assumptions of GBV staff and service providers. The third one is mapping local organisations of persons with disabilities, their skills and capacities in GBV prevention and risk mitigation. Thank you to those that are already completing it. You can select more than one if you think you can do more than one in the next 12 months. We also have listed down here recruiting persons with disabilities as staff and volunteers. Integrating content about persons with disabilities into GBV training packages and community awareness raising. Strengthening national policies and protocols. We heard a bit about that today, also from Vivek and Shahida and Hassan. And then integrating it into coordination meetings, or even monitoring how many people with disabilities are attending our programs. So if I could just ask you to kindly take a moment to think about which of these you might be able to do in your programs. And, it is anonymous. I'm not going to be singling any people out, but it'd be good for us to see which ones we feel we have potential to do more and which ones we're going to see as more challenging. And what we will do next is split into smaller groups to discuss what our priorities are in terms of moving these things forward. So let's just give it another 10 seconds to complete this poll. Thank you to those that have completed. About half of you have voted so far. So if I could ask those of you that haven't voted to just take a quick look at the pieces that are on the screen, the statements that are on the screen, and select which ones you think resonate with you as actions that are realistic to do. Okay, last couple of seconds before we close this poll and have a look at the results. Okay, I'm ending the poll now. And I'll share the results with everyone. Hopefully you should be able to see the results now. You can see that including persons with disabilities in age and gender appropriate GBV consultations is one of the ones that we think we can do quite well, followed by assessing attitudes and assumptions. That's a really, really good place to start. And in fact, I think it touches on a little bit in relation to what Vivek was sharing before about, you know, starting out with a sort of establishing what your level of understanding is amongst your team and amongst service providers, and really talking honestly about that so that it doesn't become a barrier to advancing disability inclusion. 61% think that you can start integrating content about persons with disabilities into your GBV training packages and community awareness raising activities. And we shared some examples of those tools and resources last week. So that's great. It looks like those are the top 3 that people have selected. So thank you for participating in that poll. What we're going to do now is just move on to a group activity. We have about 25 minutes to split into groups now and to talk about the priorities as you see it moving forward. So I have a few questions here for you to consider. The first one is, which of these recommended actions are a priority in your context? Just share a little bit about that and why that is. What training tools and resources you might need to implement these actions. And then we'd love each group to just feed back on recommendations that you have for perhaps the GBV AoR, but also the disability reference group that's playing a role in rolling out these guidelines. We would love to be able to take some of those recommendations to these different groups. So we will split into 3 groups. I will try to put myself in one group, Vivek in another group, and Jennifer Chase has joined us from the GBV AoR. Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind just saying a quick hello, because I'll put you in one group as well, and we will facilitate the discussion.
Hi,
Jennifer,
this is Jennifer Chase, and I'm the GBV AoR coordinator at the global level in Geneva. And yeah, I think these webinars have been actually very useful, and I have been already trying to include a more inclusive approach, just having listened to these webinars. So I really appreciate being part of this. And Emma, just to let you know,
Hi, everyone. My apologies. I was muted there. I'm just checking if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I think we have everyone back in the main room. The first thing I have to say is a huge apologies to Jennifer, because I got a little overexcited about our breakout rooms and I split everyone up into breakout rooms before she had a chance to finish talking. So Jennifer, my apologies. Would you like to finish the point that you were making before I cut you off? My sincere apologies.
Yeah, no, actually, it was about a question that's in the chat, and it's now been incorporated into our group discussion. So it's fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience with my technical issues, especially you, Jennifer. So what I'm going to do is invite each of the facilitators that were in a group to share what they heard from the group, in particular, any recommendations that they heard from the group for the GBV AoR or even for the disability reference group. Jennifer, would you like to start?
Well, so you talk about your technical problems, so I will talk about mine. I think my technical problems are a disability for me as well. I was not clear on how much time we had, and I think I was looking at the time that remained for the webinar itself. So we didn't really get to the recommendations, but we did discuss some of the activities and then looked at what might be needed in terms of resources and tools.
That's okay.
But we didn't really get to the recommendations, so that's my fault.
All right, and that's
timekeeper.
My fault as well. I'm learning about these breakout rooms as I go along, so I will be better next time. But
I'm never a good timekeeper, not even when we're face to face. So anyway. I think that, we heard from the whole of Syria operation about, and I think a lot of these apply to different settings, about ensuring that documents are more accessible. So, using videos, maybe videos with sign language, creating simple documents that have easy language, having different training online that can be accessible at any time in Arabic. This was the case of the Middle East. And then making women and girls spaces accessible. So really thinking about how they can be constructed or adapted in a way that makes them accessible. Recruiting staff who can use sign language, especially for like cash and voucher programs, so that there's greater access to cash and voucher. And I think we also heard about just the overall camp design. So thinking spatially, not just definitely including like wash facilities, but also thinking spatially, how is the camp organized or set up in a way that from the very beginning it's accessible, or how to adjust it so that that becomes accessible. And then issues around mental health and PSS, especially during COVID, how to enable access without discrimination, and thinking about community health workers, thinking of course with protocols in place for COVID, but how can there be increased home visits to households by community health workers? So those were sort of some of the priority areas. And then we also heard about in Zambia, the government and the UN are working together on GBV programming. So the person on this call who's been on the whole series has been looking how to take this information into that process to help sensitize. And they're working with the Ministry of Traditional Leaders and chairpersons. And so they're also, and the Ministry of Gender, and they're trying to put all of their resources together, because there's a lot of GBV guidance, but maybe focused on children or focused on disabilities or focused on referral pathways. So they're gathering it all together to try to create some kind of single document that gives an overview broadly and the need for that is once they've gathered everything and identified gaps, then they would like to have support on what's available externally to meet those gaps.
And clearly the GBV community of practice obviously serves as a great tool for linking people to other resources that might be available, right? In terms of trainings and guidelines and things like that. That's great. Thank you, Jennifer.
And then, yeah, one of the questions, this was the question that was put in the chat that I was trying to raise. So
please go ahead.
So this was the question about, how, if there are tools or suggestions on how to measure attitudes and perceptions of ourselves, of staff, so that we can better address access issues, understanding also the social norms around that persons with disabilities that might prohibit them or stop them from disclosing around sexual violence or GBV, and if there's guidance on this and how to better enable or facilitate disclosure in a way that is safe, and how to engage families and communities to support. So those were sort of some of the areas of need, if those materials exist, or if they don't, then if there could be ways looking at how to develop for that.
Sure. So there are actually tools relating to those that we could perhaps direct people to. What I'm going to do is prepare a follow-up email to everyone who's registered for this webinar series, and I'll specifically make reference to some locations where there are tools that you might want to review in relation to these two topics, attitudes of staff and service providers, and also safe disclosures. And that way people can see those and adapt those to their different contexts. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just aware of time.
Yeah, just the final one is
Sure.
Around working with religious leaders or traditional leaders, if there's materials or ideas on or tools for that as well. And the final one was a gap around sign language, like need for teaching and learning sign language. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll move on to Vivek next. Vivek, did you want to share like just some very top line, I'm afraid we're running out of time, but some top line messages from your group?
Yes, so I will not repeat what Jennifer has already shared, because those are the recommendations which were common, I think, in our group also. Like people wanted to make their infrastructure, the facilities more accessible. They wanted access audit checklist where they can do it either with the disability focused organization support or themselves. They want to do more inclusive needs assessment. So they were looking at some of the tools which can help them in identifying nexus between disability and GBV. They know that it is higher, but is there something, because this came from colleagues from Germany who is working in the refugee settings there. So those are some of the things I think we can help through sharing the tools and practices in AoR. There was also some of the discussion around how to use tools. Sometimes tools are there, but they are a bit difficult in translating into practice. So I think, again, our ongoing discussion at the community of practice level will help them, bringing context from other areas. Also, there was, some focus on inclusive facilitation. During case management, it is not always easy to involve caregivers. So can there be some sort of tools which can help them to communicate with people with disabilities, especially through toys, pictures, this sort of thing. Those tools will be helpful for them. And from our experience also, we have realized that there is not much documentation around inclusive facilitation. There are some learning experiences, but those are some of the tools can be developed further. There was also, on making HRP inclusive, budgeting around inclusive GBV, and 5W or data collection inclusive. These are some of the tools requirement.
Great, thank you so much. And then just to summarize the two big messages from the group I was in, people are quite keen to have materials relating to the IASC guidelines for awareness raising so that they can go away and and train others and raise awareness with their own colleagues on the IASC guidelines. And there was also a really interesting point, and something that I do think is actually a big gap from what I know about what's out there in the sector, in relation to guidance on how to support adult survivors with disabilities who need to transition from, say, safe shelters, women's shelters, to sort of longer term arrangements when they're no longer able to stay in their own homes. And so, obviously we spend a lot of time making sure that those shelters are accessible so that they have access to those shelters for women and safe spaces for women. However, thinking about the longer term support that individual might need, particularly if they've had to be separated from their family as part of this process, is a really important piece to consider. So thanks to those that made those contributions. Shahida, I know that you wanted to make one last intervention before we move into closing. Shahida, are you there? I'm sorry, we had a bit of a mix-up with you in the different rooms. So if you're there, I welcome you to unmute yourself and contribute to the wider, whatever point it was you had.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's already shared by Mr. Vivek and Miss Jennifer. So I also like to say that develop some tools which will be more inclusive, just like as sign language, which is absent in Rohingya refugee context. So that's all from my side. As Vivek also mentioned this issue clearly. Thank you, Emma.
Great. Thank you, Shahida. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who contributed. There was obviously some very rich discussion, so I appreciate your time on that. I just wanted to close with a few things that you can start doing right now. So you can start sharing information about the IASC Disability Guidelines with your GBV colleagues and partners. We have actually prepared a sort of generic presentation which you can take and use when you're raising awareness with others, and that's on the Dropbox. You can start making contact with organizations of women with disabilities in your countries to learn more about their work and how you could all collaborate together in the future. Now remember, we've already introduced you through previous webinars to a lot of women with disabilities who are running their own organizations in lots of different contexts. So please do feel free to reach out to the likes of Abia and the Lebanese Association for Self-Advocacy in Lebanon, also Rosweta Madarwikwa, who is the chairperson of the Network of African Women with Disabilities. We're happy to connect you to all these people. And then you can start integrating case studies and examples relating to women and girls with disabilities into your GBV training materials. And we have a whole bunch of materials on the Dropbox that you can do that you can use to do that. On that note, I would like to perhaps say thank you to everyone who has participated and the speakers. We really appreciate your contributions. I'm going to launch a poll, but while I'm launching that poll for you to respond to, I might invite Jennifer to make some closing comments. Jennifer.
Yeah, just to say, I think this series has been very useful also for identifying gaps and needs. And it's been great to hear examples of work that's happening. Just as Emma said earlier, the community of practice is a great place to post questions that you have around available resources and tools, and for sharing information peer-to-peer. So the idea, is always that you can ask a question related to GBV and women and girls with disabilities or survivors, to find out how others are adapting their programs or developing programs, or what tools are out there that people have used and liked. So I encourage everyone to continue to use the community of practice. And Sarah Martin was sick today, but you can find how to apply on our GBV AoR website. if you want to be part of the community of practice, if you're not part of it already. And also the GBV AoR has a help desk where you can ask a question and people will actually do research for you. So you can ask some of your questions and they will be in touch with you to find out really concretely what you want to know. And then they have professionals who do the research for you and provide you with a document with the response to your questions. So those are a couple of resources that you can use. And just to let you know, I think because of the series and the GBV AoR, Global Protection Cluster Forum, we've also been raising the need to have sign language and closed caption on all of these different webinars, not just the GBV AoR, but for the Global Protection Cluster. So this is something we'll be raising funding for to try to also make these webinars more accessible. And thank you all for teaching me so many things today.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your participation. If you could kindly complete the poll on the screen at the moment, that would be great. We will be sending out, this is the last of the webinars in this series, and we will be sending out an email to all those that are registered with some of these links and tools and resources that Jennifer has just mentioned. Thank you everyone for participating. We really appreciate it. Have a great day wherever you are.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.